Welcome to JK Tells a Story, where real-life dramas unfold. Sit back and enjoy today's tale. When I was 17, I thought I had it all figured out. Ashley Peterson, Dublin High School's head cheerleader, was everything a teenage guy from suburban Columbus could dream of. We were both 18 by spring senior year, and I was absolutely certain we were meant to be together forever. You couldn't slip a piece of paper between us. That's how inseparable we'd become throughout that school year. One evening in May, I was driving through the school parking lot on my way home from my shift at Kroger when I spotted her car. My stomach dropped. Ashley was supposed to be at the baseball game with the other cheerleaders that night, cheering on the Dublin Kaufman Shamrocks. But there was her red Honda Civic, parked in the far corner of the lot, and it was moving. As I pulled closer, my world shattered. Through the fogged windows, I could see my girlfriend with Tyler Brooks, some loser from the wrestling team. The betrayal hit me like a freight train. I peeled out of that parking lot, driving aimlessly through the quiet streets of Dublin, past the manicured lawns and brick colonials that usually made me feel safe. Some dark part of my mind kept whispering dangerous thoughts as I passed the thick oak trees lining Riverside Drive. I could just jerk the wheel to the right. It would all be over. But somehow, I kept driving straight and headed home to our house on Bridge Street. Maybe my parents would know what to do about this crushing pain in my chest. But when I walked through the front door, all I found was a note on the kitchen counter. Gone to dinner and a movie. Home late. Love, Mom and Dad. A heavy blanket of despair settled over me. I wandered into Dad's home office and tried the handle of his gun safe. I knew what was inside: his hunting shotgun from his duck hunting trips to Lake Erie, and the service revolver from his 20 years with the Columbus Police Department. My father's careful precaution of locking up his firearms probably saved my life that night. I was that far gone. Now, as an adult looking back, I wonder why it hit me so hard. But the teenage brain isn't exactly known for rational thinking. What seems manageable to an adult can feel world-ending when you're 18. I collapsed on my bed, still fully dressed, waiting for my parents to come home. But exhaustion took over, and I fell asleep. When I woke up the next morning, someone had covered me with my old Ohio State blanket. Sunlight was streaming through my bedroom window. It was going to be a beautiful spring day. Walking downstairs to the kitchen, I found Mom making her famous weekend pancakes while Dad sat at the breakfast table, reading the Columbus Dispatch with his ever-present cup of coffee. You could tell just from looking at them that their date night had been a success. After 25 years of marriage, these two people were still crazy about each other. The sight of their happiness hit me like a sledgehammer. I was overwhelmed with shame, thinking about how devastated they would have been if they'd come home to find their son's lifeless body in the office. The three of us spent the next hour talking around that kitchen table. I was lucky to have parents I could actually open up to. I left that conversation with a much clearer sense of my own worth and some concrete plans for moving forward. I didn't say another word to Ashley. Every time she tried to approach me at school, I gave her nothing but ice-cold silence. I thought about asking for the expensive necklace back, the one I'd given her for her 18th birthday, paid for with an entire month's wages from Kroger. But I decided my dignity was worth more than the money. After a week of this treatment, she showed up at our front door, tears streaming down her face. My grandmother happened to be visiting that day and answered the door. After listening to Ashley's tearful pleas for forgiveness, Grandma Margaret simply said, "What are you waiting for, young lady? You got caught fooling around with another boy. My grandson isn't going to stand there and make a fool of himself. You better move on with your life, because Michael already has." With that, she firmly closed the door. It was too late to find a date for prom. Ashley ended up going with Tyler, that wrestling team creep. I have no idea if they had a good time at the dance, but I know for sure they didn't enjoy the aftermath when Tyler had to get his car's engine rebuilt. I'm sure the sugar in his gas tank really put a damper on their evening. That whole experience left a lasting mark on me. I became more guarded, less willing to wear my heart on my sleeve. I promised myself I'd never be anyone's fool again. More than one promising relationship in college got cut short when I sensed a girl couldn't be trusted with my heart. 10 years later, I was living in a different world entirely. I'd graduated from Ohio State with my bachelor's degree and earned my MBA from Case Western Reserve University. My IT consulting career was taking off, and I'd married the most incredible woman I'd ever met. Michael, what the hell is this? Catherine Williams, Kate to her friends, stood over my leather reading chair in our Worthington home, holding a piece of notebook paper in one hand and a used book in the other. I hadn't had time to crack open this particular book yet. I'd ordered it online from some used book dealer, and it was still sitting on my ever-growing to read shelf along with about 20 others. For some reason, I focused on the book instead of the paper, which confused me because Kate never got upset about my book purchases. In fact, she usually enjoyed reading whatever I picked up. "It's the wrong man," I said, squinting at the cover. "Some investigative piece about Sam Shepard's trial. You know, the guy who inspired The Fugitive?" Kate looked at me like I was speaking a foreign language. "Not the book, idiot." She shoved the piece of notebook paper under my nose. "This." She was practically yelling now, which was completely out of character for my usually composed wife. I tried to take the paper, but Kate seemed reluctant to let go, as if it contained state secrets. Finally, she released it, and I stood up from my chair, setting aside the novel I'd been reading. The words on the paper were written in distinctly feminine handwriting. "Mike, you need to divorce that which you're married to before she drives you so crazy that you end up hurting her. I'll wait for you, but not forever. Love, Daddy. P.S. Just so you know, we had fun one more time. Hope to see those divorce papers soon." I read the note twice, my mind racing. This had to be someone's idea of a sick joke. Looking up from the paper, I saw fire in Kate's eyes. "Kate, I honestly have no idea who this is from or what it means. Where did you find this?" She held up the book. "It was inside your book. Don't play dumb just because you were sloppy enough to leave it there." I spent the next 30 minutes trying to explain that I'd bought the book online and hadn't even looked through it yet. The note must have belonged to the previous owner. But what were the odds that the original owner's name was also Mike? The timing for this discovery couldn't have been worse. It was like a perfect storm of bad circumstances converging on our marriage. First, I'd made the huge mistake of getting too close to a female coworker last year. Jennifer Martinez, Jen to everyone at the office, and I had started flirting during late nights working on the nationwide insurance project. It escalated to the point where we'd gone out to dinner one evening. During that dinner, Jen had basically propositioned me, suggesting I leave Kate. I was tempted, I'll admit. It was during a rough patch in our marriage. We were both working crazy hours, trying to impress our respective bosses instead of focusing on each other. Plus, Jen was like something out of a fantasy, smart and gorgeous and interested in me. But I didn't cross that line. Jen's offer did wake up my conscience, though. I realized I needed to go home and fix what was broken between Kate and me. I loved my wife, despite our recent problems. When I got home that night, I told Kate we needed to work on our relationship. But I made a critical error in judgment by confessing how close I'd come to making a huge mistake. Things had been rocky between us for several weeks, but I'd managed to convince Kate that she was the only woman in my life. She seemed to believe me until this evening, when she found that damn note. Second, I'd been putting in extra hours at the office for the past 3 months. It was justified. I was angling for a significant bonus and possibly a promotion if I could bring the current project in on time and under budget. There were plenty of good reasons I wanted that promotion, but one trumped all the others. It was no secret that Kate's parents thought she'd married beneath her social class. Her father, Robert Harrison, was CFO of the largest independent bank in Ohio. He was Harvard Business School Old Columbus money. Her mother, Victoria Harrison, was a Vassar graduate who'd grown up in the kind of family where people had summer homes instead of vacation rentals. Kate herself had graduated from Princeton. Meanwhile, I was a kid from a middle-class family who'd worked his way through Ohio State. Even my MBA from Case Western didn't seem to impress them much. If I got this promotion, I'd finally be on track for the executive level. Maybe even prove to Kate's parents that their daughter hadn't settled for some blue-collar wannabe. But lately, my time away from home had become a real point of tension between us. Third, Kate had been spending more and more time with her mother recently, a woman who'd never exactly warmed up to me or our relationship. Just last week, Kate and I had gotten into a serious argument about my work schedule. Harsh words were exchanged on both sides. But the worst part was when Kate said her mother was right about me, that I was selfish and unworthy of her. I'd lost my temper and called her mother exactly what the mystery note writer had called Kate. A witch. Could this nightmare get any worse? Yes, it could. And it did. Now, dear reader, you're probably thinking I got caught red-handed. Most of you, especially the women reading this, are probably thinking, "Give it up, buddy. You're busted." But I swear on my grandmother's grave, I'm innocent. I ended up sleeping on the couch that night, never able to convince Kate that the note wasn't mine. She locked our bedroom door, which felt like a knife to the heart. Thursday morning, I went to work and told my boss I needed to cut back on the overtime. He'd been through a divorce himself and said he understood completely. I brought Kate flowers that evening. At least she didn't throw them in the trash. She even thanked me as she arranged them in a vase. We slept in the same bed that night, but the chill in the air could have frozen Lake Erie. By Friday evening, things still hadn't thawed out. Kate announced she was spending the weekend at her parents' house in Upper Arlington. That definitely wasn't going to help the situation. "Kate, please don't go," I said, following her as she packed an overnight bag. "We need to work through this together." "I need some time to cool off and think," she replied without looking at me. "And before you say anything, yes, I know what you think about my mother. But right now, I need to talk to someone who loves me unconditionally." I almost pointed out that her mother was the last person who'd give her objective advice about our marriage, but I was smart enough to keep my mouth shut. No point in making things worse by turning her against the in-laws, which always seemed to backfire anyway. I spent the weekend staring at those flowers and thinking about how much I truly loved my wife. I took long walks around our Worthington neighborhood with our golden retriever, Samson, thinking about all the ways our marriage could be saved. Saturday night, I sent Kate a text. "Would you consider couples counseling?" The reply was brief. "We'll talk when I get home Sunday night." Sunday came and went. Sunday night, I received another message. "Had too much wine at dinner. Staying another night. Home Monday." That's when I started getting really angry. I was innocent. Damn it, I knew a weekend with her mother was a bad idea. Victoria Harrison had never liked me, and I was sure she was filling Kate's head with poison about how her daughter deserved someone better. Monday morning, Kate came home just as I was leaving for work. I got an unconvincing kiss and a mumbled, "We'll talk tonight," before she rushed upstairs to get ready for her job at the marketing firm downtown. I worked a full day but left the office early to pick up Chinese takeout from our favorite place in Clintonville. By the time Kate walked through the door at 7, the food was ready, the table was set, and I'd opened a decent bottle of wine. Dinner was quiet, polite, but distant. We opened our fortune cookies, and I poured a couple glasses of wine. That's when Kate started the conversation I'd been dreading. "Michael," she began, swirling the wine in her glass, "I've been doing a lot of thinking this weekend." "I figured as much," I replied carefully. "My mother thinks I should consider a trial separation." And there it was, the poison I'd expected. Victoria Harrison, working behind the scenes to destroy our marriage. "What do you think?" I asked, though my heart was already sinking. Kate took a long sip of wine before answering. I think I need more time. This whole thing with the note, and your confession about that woman at work. I don't know what to believe anymore. Kate, I swear to you that note isn't mine, and nothing happened with Jen. I told you about it because I wanted to be honest, not because I'd actually done anything wrong. But you thought about it, she said quietly. You went to dinner with her. You considered her proposition. I couldn't deny that. For about 5 minutes, yeah. But then I came home to you. I chose us. Did you, though? Because from where I'm sitting, it feels like you chose your job. 60-hour weeks, canceled dinner plans, working weekends. I'm trying to build a future for us. I thought you understood that. Maybe I did once. But now, she shook her head. I just need some space to figure out what I want. Michael, Kate continued, setting down her wine glass, I don't trust you anymore, and that's not a healthy foundation for a marriage. Mom says I should just cut my losses and leave. Let's keep your mother out of this conversation, I replied, trying to stay calm. You know she's never liked me. Let's focus on what you and I need, Kate said firmly. I need space and time to think. I suggest you move into the guest room until we get everything sorted out. I hated that idea. What married couple solves their problems by sleeping in separate bedrooms? What about what I suggested, couples counseling? Maybe, but not right now. Right now, I need time to think for myself. I couldn't help myself. Does think for yourself include your mother? Kate's eyes flashed with anger. My mom only wants what's best for me. If I need to talk to my mother, I will. That was the end of it. I moved my things into the spare bedroom and barely slept that night. Looking back, maybe I should provide some context about how Kate and I met. It was during my first year out of business school, when one of the Big Four accounting firms hired me. After my initial training period, I was assigned to help a local non-governmental organization with their computer systems as a pro bono project. Our regional manager sat on the NGO's board of directors, and I was assigned to them for the duration of their system upgrade. In the end, everything turned out well. The NGO got a brand new server system, and I met my future bride. Catherine Taylor, she hadn't become Kate Williams yet. That wouldn't happen until we married. Was going to be a senior at Princeton in the fall, and was spending the summer as an unpaid intern. The more time I spent with this woman, the more I fell in love. We dated throughout that summer. Kate was smart, confident, and best of all, had the kind of natural beauty that made men turn their heads on the street. Although she came from an upper-class background, I was particularly impressed with how kindly she treated everyone in the office, from the cleaning staff to the organization's president. There was always a please or thank you or some other considerate word. Physically, Kate was out of my league. I'm a decent-looking guy, big enough that I played defensive end at Ohio State, but Kate, at 5'10", looked stunning next to my 6-foot frame, even when she wore her 5-inch heels. Where we really diverged was in social status. Kate was an only child from a 2-parent household whose backgrounds were nothing like my more middle-class family. My mother taught 2nd grade at a Catholic elementary school, and my father owned an auto repair shop in Clintonville. I was one of 4 children, all college graduates, all reasonably successful middle-class professionals. Mom and Dad were rightfully proud of their kids. My parents had instilled in us a work ethic that helped me succeed professionally. After only 2 years at the accounting firm, I was hired by one of our clients. We'd just completed a successful consulting job with TMG2 Engineering Incorporated and had saved the company millions in their transition from mainframe to server-based computing. TMG2 offered me a position because it meant no travel and the pay was comparable to what I was making. I still work at TMG2 now as a project manager in the information technology department. My current project, the one that was keeping me at the office so many extra hours, involved migrating our systems to the then new concept of cloud computing. Few companies our size had moved to the cloud yet. I had to convince the board to approve the transition, and if it worked out as I expected, I had a real chance at getting the newly proposed position of Chief Information Officer. Until now, the IT department had been run by the CFO, and he'd been a strong supporter of creating the new position. Tuesday morning, I woke up in the guest bedroom. It took me a few moments to get my bearings, But when I went downstairs, the coffee was already ready. Kate was upstairs in the shower. For a moment, I considered joining her. We'd always enjoyed our morning routines together. But I decided to give her the space she'd asked for. After drinking a cup of coffee, I headed to the guest bathroom and began getting ready for work. All week, the relationship remained strained. Kate had been putting in long days at the marketing firm, so I decided to do the same and throw myself back into my cloud computing project. I think my boss was pleased. He probably thought my marriage problems were solved and that I didn't give a damn about working overtime anymore. Friday afternoon, I sent Kate a text. "Can I take you out to dinner tonight? You picked the restaurant." 10 long minutes later, I got her reply, "Going to my mom's for the weekend." This was getting ridiculous. I immediately called her, and she answered politely but distantly. "How can we work on our marriage if you're never home?" I asked. "I told you I needed time. It's only been a week. You have to respect my wishes." I tried my best to remain calm and made my case for staying home together for the weekend, but all my arguments fell on deaf ears. She finally agreed to consider my third request for counseling. "Will I see you before you leave for the city tonight?" "No, I've already packed my bags. I'll probably be back Monday night. I'll stay the weekend and go straight to work from New York. Another weekend with just Samson and me. 2 more days of trying to figure out how to fix what felt increasingly broken." Saturday morning, I had an idea. I found the phone number of the used bookstore where I'd bought The Wrong Man and called them. "Hello," I said when someone answered. "I bought a used copy of The Wrong Man from your store about 3 weeks ago. You shipped it to me, and inside was a romantic note written by someone named Mike, which happens to also be my name. My wife found the note and is accusing me of having an affair. I need to speak to the Mike who the book originally belonged to." The salesperson had the nerve to laugh. "Man, what are the odds? A book called The Wrong Man, owned by 2 guys named Mike, and even with a love note inside." The clerk was starting to piss me off. "Look, this isn't funny. My wife needs assurance that I'm not the Mike who received that note from this woman. Does your system track buyers and sellers?" "Yes, if the guy is registered with us. A lot of people who sell us their used books have accounts in our system. But I can't give you a name or phone number. What if you take my name and phone number and contact the other Mike, asking him to call me?" "I can do that. What's your name so I can trace the book?" "Mike Thompson." "As in the writer?" I was puzzled. "What writer?" He laughed again. "Michael Thompson. He writes detective novels." This conversation was getting bizarre. "Look, forget about any author. I'm Michael Thompson, not some mystery writer. I don't even read that genre." I gave him my phone number and was pleasantly surprised when my phone rang 20 minutes later. "My name is Mike, and I'm told you found a note written to me. Is this some sort of blackmail attempt?" "No, it's not blackmail," I replied quickly. "I bought a book called The Wrong Man that belonged to you. Inside was a note from a woman named Terry. I need you to tell my wife that the note was written to you, not me." "The note was in a book? Hell, I've been looking everywhere for that stupid woman's note. If my wife had found it, I'd be dead. I can't believe it ended up in that book. Mike, pay attention. I need you to tell my wife what happened." "No way. I dodged that bullet. Terry is history and I'm still married. I'm going to keep it that way." He hung up. It took me 5 minutes to calm down and gather my thoughts. I dialed the number that had appeared in my received calls log. "Hello, Mike, it's Mike. I've changed my mind." "What do you mean?" "This is blackmail. If you don't send me a notarized statement that Terry sent you that love note, your wife will receive a notarized letter from me with a copy of Terry's note." "How does that sound?" "Man, that's cold. Probably not as cold as it's been in my house since Terry's note was discovered by my wife." Okay. But you'll promise it's over after that?" "I promise. Just send the statement. Remember, it has to be notarized, or my wife won't believe it." I gave him my address and emphasized the urgency. Don't hesitate, get it done this week. The longer my wife thinks I'm cheating, the harder it'll be to repair my marriage. You'll get it by Tuesday, he promised. That weekend dragged by slowly. Kate came home Monday night looking refreshed but distant. We had a polite dinner, but she was clearly still processing whatever her mother had filled her head with during their weekend together. Tuesday morning, I woke up in the guest room, still unable to find any balance. But that afternoon, something shifted in the war for Kate's mind, and I also did something I swore I'd never do. I invaded her privacy. While Kate was showering and getting ready for work, I opened her laptop and logged into her email program. There were too many messages to read in the short time I had, so I plugged in an external hard drive and downloaded the contents of her inbox and other folders. Like most computer users, Kate didn't permanently delete emails, so everything was there. I managed to read 2 emails from her mother before I had to close the laptop, but I knew that further reading would reveal some very interesting information. After Kate left for work, I spent an hour reading through everything. I hated violating Kate's personal space, but there wasn't much choice. Her mother and I were waging a war for Kate's mind and our marriage. All's fair in love and war, right? Plus, the emails proved I was right to be concerned. In one of them, her mother urged Kate to transfer to her company's New York office and move to the city permanently. There was also correspondence from some guy named David Coleman, talking about a dinner party at her parents' house that they'd both attended, and expressing his desire to start a regular correspondence with Kate. As cold as our relationship had become, reading Kate's emails actually gave me hope for our future. In response to her mother's sarcastic comments about our marriage, Kate professed her love for me and her hope that our relationship would survive. Her mother was equally adamant that there was little hope, and in several messages, she brought up my confession about Jennifer Martinez, essentially telling Kate that I must have cheated with Jen and probably countless other women, including this latest one, referring to Terry's note. Kate's only email to David Coleman was a response to his message. She reminded him that she was married, said she hoped our marriage could be saved, and asked him to respect her wishes to be left alone. I spent Tuesday evening reading through all of this correspondence, trying to understand the full scope of what we were dealing with. Tuesday night, Kate came home in a surprisingly good mood, which improved even more when I checked the mail and found a letter from the other Mike. He must have really wanted this nightmare to be over. I opened the envelope and found a notarized statement confirming that he was the Mike who'd owned the book and left Terry's note inside. He'd even included an apology for the trouble it had caused. That evening, when Kate came home, grilled steaks, a fresh salad, and a bottle of wine were waiting for her. We ate a pleasant dinner before I handed her the letter from the other Mike. When Kate read the letter, her eyes filled with tears. She got up from her chair, sat on my lap, and kissed me. "That makes me so happy, Michael," she said softly. "Almost as happy as I am to have you back in my arms. It's been too long. Would you like a glass of wine?" "Yes, Kate. Would you mind pouring me a glass?" "Sure. Do you want some water too?" "No, I don't want to be running to the bathroom all night. Just wine." "Thanks." I went to the kitchen, poured her more wine, and grabbed myself a beer. I set the wine on her nightstand. I could see the determination in Kate's face as I lay down next to her. "You don't know what it's like, Michael," she began, "wondering if your parents love you or if you're just another social accessory. Think about how differently you were raised, how your mother and father welcomed me into their lives from the moment we met. Then compare that to how my parents treat you." I interrupted her. "They've never liked me." Kate gave me that look, the same one she always gave me when I interrupted her. "You think it's just about you? How many times have you seen any real warmth toward me? Their own daughter." I had to admit it was rare, but I'd always assumed it was a reaction to her marrying me. I stayed silent and nodded for her to continue. "Now imagine you're a young girl, and your parents react to your presence with that same cold indifference. When I turned 10, they sent me away to boarding school. I never thought they didn't like you, I said quietly. I assumed they were treating you the way they'd always treated me, with polite distance. Tell me, Michael, what does this have to do with our marriage? Why has it suddenly become so important to you? Kate took a sip of wine before continuing. Because 3 or 4 months ago, my mom called and asked me to lunch. She said she wanted to rebuild our relationship and apologize for the way we drifted apart. She threw me an emotional lifeline, and I'll admit, I grabbed it. Since then, she and I have been spending more time together. She told me how proud she was that I graduated from Princeton, and she was very complimentary about my career. I mentioned that we were thinking about starting a family, and she advised me to wait. Kate's voice became more emotional. My mother said that's what destroyed her own career ambitions. When my father insisted she get pregnant. She thinks she was too young to have a child, and that's one of the reasons she and I were never close. She blames my father for pressuring her, and now she says you're doing the same thing to me, making me lose my individuality and sense of fulfillment. I was struck by that last statement. Kate, that's incredibly ironic. Last year, you were the one who brought up starting a family. When I hesitated, you decided we should get a dog first to test our parenting instincts, as you put it. We got Samson, and I realized a few months ago that we were ready, that we'd make great parents. And now your mom is saying, I want you to get pregnant and become some kind of domestic servant. She didn't say that exactly. It's the same thing, Kate. It sounds like Victoria is deliberately driving a wedge between us. Kate's voice rose slightly. Yes, we talked about starting a family, but I started to raise my voice, which is never a good thing. Kate responded immediately. Mom only wants what's best for me. For the second time in 2 weeks, Kate uttered those exact words. I was reminded of the movie The Stepford Wives, where all the wives became obedient servants to their husbands. Was I suddenly dealing with a Stepford daughter? I need this, Michael. I need a relationship with at least one of my parents. You've been spoiled your whole life, 2 loving parents, 3 siblings who adore you. I need a mother in my life. I almost asked, what about us? But realized it was better not to ask. In the mood Kate was in right then, she'd take it as selfishness on my part. Besides, I had to be careful. The last thing I could afford was to reveal what I'd learned from reading her emails. But I had to ask the question that was eating at me. Is there someone else, Kate? Kate sat up and looked me straight in the face, her eyes burning into mine. Hell no, Michael. No, I would never cheat on you. I felt compelled to defend myself. I'm worried about all these weekends in New York. I'm worried because you're an attractive woman, and I know your parents have an active social life. I know men are going to notice you and ask you out. Kate's reply didn't sound suspicious. I've only been to one dinner party that my parents hosted last weekend. One of my dad's coworkers was there, but you don't have to worry. It wasn't some kind of setup. I remained silent and responded only by putting my arm around her shoulders and kissing her gently. My bottle of beer and Kate's wine glass were already empty. I turned off the bedside light, and we exchanged I love yous. I rolled over onto my back and closed my eyes, hoping to get some sleep so I could forget my fears for a few hours. So much for a magical reconciliation, I thought to myself. The next night, I checked Kate's phone while she was making dinner. Damn, 2 calls from her mother today, both lasting over 30 minutes. I was totally screwed. During dinner, I decided to take a chance. Kate, would you like to spend the weekend at the coast? I can get us a room at Put-in-Bay. Kate had the grace to look guilty. I'm sorry, Michael. Mom called today. She has 2 tickets to see The Merchant of Venice with Al Pacino. She asked me to join her Saturday night. Can we go to the lake next weekend instead? Yes, of course. Next weekend. At least I got to sleep in my own bed again. We slept together, but we didn't make love. Thursday morning, I made my decision. I had the email addresses of my mother-in-law and David Coleman, and with those, the war was about to escalate dramatically. What I did next could get me fired, banned from working in any IT department, and possibly land me in jail if I got caught. I sent fake emails to Victoria Harrison and David Coleman. Both emails appeared to be from a well-known online business and contained links that, when opened, would infect both computers with two different viruses. One virus would allow me remote access to each computer, and the other was a keylogger that would record everything typed on their keyboards, including usernames and passwords. David Coleman and Victoria Harrison, like many people who get scammed online, would never know their computers had been infected. The viruses I'd sent to Victoria Harrison and David Coleman worked exactly as intended. Within hours, both had clicked on the malicious links, probably thinking they were legitimate business emails. My keylogger began recording every keystroke, every password, every private message. Their computers were now windows into their scheming minds. What I discovered over the next few days made my blood boil. Victoria hadn't just been giving Kate motherly advice during their recent bonding sessions. She'd been conducting a calculated campaign of psychological manipulation, designed to convince Kate that I was holding her back from her true potential. The emails between Victoria and David Coleman revealed the full scope of her betrayal. David wasn't just some random coworker of Robert Harrison's. He was Victoria's lover, and had been for over 2 years. The dinner party Kate had attended wasn't a social gathering. It was a carefully orchestrated setup designed to introduce Kate to David and plant seeds of doubt about our marriage. Reading through their correspondence was like watching a chess game where my wife was the prize and I was the opponent to be eliminated. Victoria had convinced David that Kate would be a perfect trophy wife for an ambitious young banking executive looking to climb the social ladder. David, for his part, seemed more than willing to play along with Victoria's scheme, especially since it meant gaining access to the Harrison family fortune and connections. The plan was diabolical in its simplicity. Victoria would continue poisoning Kate against me while simultaneously promoting David as the kind of sophisticated, successful man Kate deserved. David would play the role of the understanding friend, offering Kate a shoulder to cry on as her marriage allegedly fell apart. Once Kate was sufficiently convinced that I was wrong for her, David would make his move. But they'd made one critical mistake. They'd underestimated me. I spent the weekend documenting everything. Screenshots, email archives, chat logs. I compiled a comprehensive dossier of their conspiracy. But I knew that simply confronting Kate with this evidence wouldn't be enough. After months of her mother's manipulation, Kate might not believe me. She might think I'd fabricated the whole thing out of jealousy. I needed a different approach. I needed to catch them in the act. Monday morning, I called in a personal day and drove to Manhattan. Kate was spending another weekend with her parents, supposedly to see more theater and bond with her mother. But I suspected the real purpose was to advance whatever plan Victoria and David had cooked up. The Harrison family maintained a penthouse apartment on the Upper East Side, a remnant from the days when Robert's banking career required frequent trips to New York. Victoria had been pushing Kate to consider transferring to her marketing firm's Manhattan office, suggesting she could stay in the apartment while finding herself away from the confining influence of our marriage. I parked across the street from their building and settled in to wait. I'd brought a Yankees cap and jacket to blend in, along with a decent camera and enough snacks to last the day. If Kate was going to be manipulated into making a life-changing decision, I wanted to be there to document it. Around noon, I noticed a woman sitting on a nearby bench, also watching the building. She had the relaxed alertness of someone accustomed to surveillance work. After an hour, she struck up a conversation. "What agency are you with?" she asked casually, settling beside me on the bench. "Excuse me? You're obviously watching someone in that building. I assume you're a private investigator. So what agency are you working for?" I decided honesty might be my best option. "I'm not with an agency. My wife's parents live in that building, and I think she's being set up with another man. I'm just trying to see if my suspicions are correct." The woman studied me with professional interest. "I'm sorry to hear about your situation, but you're doing this all wrong. You're way too obvious, and that camera wouldn't get you a clear shot from 20 feet away. She unzipped her jacket to reveal a high-end Canon with a telephoto lens. Here's the deal. When you spot your wife, point her out to me. I'll get you some decent photos for $100. Trust me, they'll be worth every penny. Why would you help me? Because about a quarter of the people in this area are private investigators watching one of those 4 buildings across the street. Plus, that Yankees cap is a dead giveaway. All the out-of-town PIs think wearing local team gear will help them blend in. I took you for a small-town guy chasing a cheating wife, but I didn't figure you for the jealous husband type. Her words stung, but she continued. This part of town is crawling with detectives. Too much money and too little morality. Everyone here feels entitled to whatever they want. I'm actually watching the building next to yours, waiting for some rich lawyer to walk out with his mistress. His wife hired my agency to get evidence while she's out of town. Probably has a prenup that requires proof of adultery. She extended her hand. I'm Karen with a K. I watched the Harrison building while my new acquaintance talked. Men and women were constantly going in and out, with doormen opening doors for residents and their guests. I didn't know what David looked like, so I just had to wait for Kate to appear and see who she was with. As if summoned by my thoughts, Kate emerged from the building with a tall, well-dressed man I assumed was David Coleman. Karen immediately raised her camera and fired off several shots in rapid succession. Got him, she said with professional satisfaction. Now what? Now I try to figure out how to save my marriage, I replied, watching the cab disappear into Manhattan traffic. First things first, give me your email address and I'll send you these photos. That'll be $100. If you want, I can get more shots when they come back, but that'll cost you another $100. Deal. And here's the thing, if you can do a background check on the guy for another $300, I'll pay it. We'd need to make it legal with a contract, though. I'm a freelancer today, working as a contractor for the agency handling the lawyer's wife. As long as it doesn't interfere with my primary contract, I can work side jobs. What's the guy's name? I texted Karen my email address and David's full name. While we waited, I found myself telling her the whole story. Kate's manipulation by her mother, the mysterious note, the gradual breakdown of our marriage. Karen turned out to be an excellent listener. Eventually, my curiosity got the better of me. How did you end up as a private investigator? You don't exactly fit the stereotype. Karen laughed. I spent 15 years with the NYPD, the last 6 in the intelligence division working counterterrorism. I was shot in the leg during a raid, lost everything below the knee, and ended up on disability. She pulled up her pant leg to reveal a prosthetic. Decided to use what I'd learned to make some money, but with the flexibility to set my own schedule. It's working out so far. I rarely work weekends like today. This was a special favor for a friend at the agency. As she spoke, Karen raised her camera again and started photographing a couple getting into a limo across the street. Are you going to follow them to dinner? No, it's probably not the kind of place where I can get photos without being spotted. I'll grab something to eat on the next street over and wait for them to come back. 9 times out of 10, these couples have dinner and then return to the love nest for the night. Not much romance in these cases. So what does the mistress get out of it besides dinner? You'd be surprised. Some of these women earn as much as a good secretary. You just have to be willing to sell your soul. No thanks. What about the wives who hire you? Probably half our business. Some poor guy working 60 hours a week ends up losing most of what should be his to some smooth-talking parasite. Want to know the worst cases? When the DNA tests come back and the kids aren't his. That always ends in total warfare. Karen's expression darkened. I once had a client who broke into his ex-wife's house, sat on her bed, and shot himself. The poor guy didn't know his wife was out of town. The body was found by the housekeeper. By the time the ex came home from her spa week in Cancun, the house had been cleaned and the walls repainted. Not many happy endings in this business. We sat in silence for a moment, both lost in thought. I wasn't going to blow my brains out, but if Kate and I divorced, I'd lose the woman I loved more than life itself. Look, Karen said, checking her watch. I need to get some food. My husband is meeting me at the diner around the corner. I noticed the wedding ring I'd somehow missed earlier. It must be hard being married when you see all this ugliness every day. Does it affect your relationship? It affects a lot of my colleagues. Some can't handle all the nastiness they witness. I'm lucky. My husband Bill knows what I go through at work. He does little and big things to make sure I know I'm loved. Like tonight. I know his mom is watching our 2 boys, so he can meet me here for a quick dinner. We walked toward the diner, and I made out the silhouette of a large man waiting outside. As we got closer, I realized Bill was a very fit, handsome guy. He was about my height, but probably 30 pounds heavier, and it was clearly muscle. Karen wrapped her arms around him, and he leaned down to kiss her, but his eyes stayed on me. Bill, this is my new client, Michael. Michael, this is my husband, Bill. We shook hands, both sizing each other up with firm but not overly aggressive grips. Bill spoke first. Let me guess, defensive end? Damn, you're good, I replied. Did you play heavyweight wrestling at Penn State? I can usually tell the position by how a guy carries himself. Despite the circumstances, I found myself liking both of them. Thanks for helping me today, Karen. I know this is your job, but it means a lot. Just remember, Karen said seriously, whatever you discover tonight, don't do anything stupid. If this marriage can be saved, save it. If it can't, don't let it destroy you. There are worse things than starting over. I spent the rest of the evening in a coffee shop, thinking about Karen's words and planning my next move. Around 10, I returned to my observation post across from the Harrison building. Sure enough, Kate and David returned together, looking relaxed and comfortable with each other. Karen got several more photos of them entering the building together. What hurt most wasn't the possibility that Kate might be attracted to another man. It was the realization that she was being manipulated by someone who was supposed to love her unconditionally, her own mother. I drove back to Columbus that night with a heavy heart but a clear purpose. I had evidence of Victoria's betrayal and David's willingness to participate in breaking up my marriage. Now I needed to figure out how to use that information to save the woman I loved from making the biggest mistake of her life. The real war was just beginning. Over the next few weeks, I continued monitoring Victoria and David's digital communications while maintaining the facade of a normal marriage with Kate. The picture that emerged was even more disturbing than I'd initially suspected. Victoria wasn't just trying to break up our marriage. She was systematically isolating Kate from anyone who might give her objective advice about our relationship. She'd convinced Kate to limit her contact with her college friends, claiming they were jealous of her sophisticated New York lifestyle. She'd even suggested that Kate's close relationship with my family was unhealthy and preventing her from developing her own identity. Meanwhile, David was playing his role perfectly. His emails to Victoria detailed how he was positioning himself as the patient, understanding friend who would be there for Kate when our marriage inevitably collapsed. He'd even started sending Kate small gifts, books of poetry, flowers to her office, tickets to cultural events, all under the guise of friendship and intellectual stimulation. The most damning evidence was a series of emails between Victoria and David discussing their long-term strategy. Once Kate was divorced from me, Victoria planned to have David propose within 6 months. They'd already discussed the prenuptial agreement that would protect the Harrison family assets while giving David access to the social connections he needed to advance his career. It was a business arrangement disguised as romance, with my wife as the commodity being traded. But Victoria had made one crucial error in her calculations. She'd assumed that Kate's recent neediness for maternal approval meant she'd blindly follow her mother's advice. What Victoria didn't understand was that Kate had inherited her father's intelligence and moral compass, even if those qualities were currently being suppressed by her desperate need for family connection. I decided it was time to introduce some chaos into Victoria and David's carefully orchestrated plan. Using the access I'd gained to their computers, I began subtly altering their communications. When David sent Victoria an email about his progress in winning Kate's trust, I edited it before she received it, making his language more crudely manipulative. When Victoria replied with instructions for the next phase of their plan, I modified her words to sound more mercenary and calculating. The result was exactly what I'd hoped for. Victoria began questioning whether David was taking their arrangement seriously enough, while David started wondering if Victoria was more interested in controlling Kate than in helping her find happiness. Their alliance began to fracture. By the end of the month, Victoria and David were so suspicious of each other that they agreed to meet in person to clarify their understanding. That meeting, which I monitored through David's compromised computer, turned into a heated argument about tactics and timing. Victoria accused David of being too aggressive in his pursuit of Kate, claiming he was making her daughter suspicious. David countered that Victoria's constant criticism of me was pushing Kate away rather than toward him. The meeting ended with both of them agreeing to reassess their approach, which was code for taking a temporary step back. That brief respite gave me the opening I'd been waiting for. With Victoria's influence temporarily diminished and David backing off, Kate began returning to her normal self. She started sleeping in our bedroom again, initiated conversations about our future, and even suggested we take that delayed weekend trip to Put-in-Bay. It was during that weekend at the lake that I realized I'd been approaching this whole situation wrong. Instead of trying to expose Victoria and David's scheme, I should have been focusing on rebuilding the foundation of trust and communication that had made Kate fall in love with me in the first place. "Michael," Kate said as we walked along the shoreline Saturday evening, "I've been thinking about everything that's happened between us over the past few months. What have you been thinking?" I asked carefully. I think I lost sight of what really matters. I got so caught up in trying to have the relationship with my mother that I'd always wanted that I forgot about the relationship I already had with you. We stopped walking and faced each other. The setting sun reflected off Lake Erie, creating a golden backdrop for what I hoped would be a turning point in our marriage. "Kate, I love you more than I've ever loved anyone or anything. Whatever problems we've had, whatever mistakes I've made, I want us to work through them together." "I want that too," she said, tears beginning to form in her eyes. "But Michael, I need to know that you trust me, and I need to trust you completely." It was in that moment that I made a decision that would change everything. I could continue my secret war against Victoria and David, manipulating them from the shadows while pretending everything was normal with Kate. Or I could take the ultimate risk and trust my wife with the truth. "Kate," I said, taking her hands in mine, "there are some things I need to tell you about your mother and David Coleman, things that might be hard to hear, but things you need to know if we're going to build a future together based on complete honesty." And there, on the shores of Lake Erie, with the weekend sunset painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, I began telling my wife about the conspiracy that had nearly destroyed our marriage. I told her about the surveillance, the hacking, the evidence I'd collected. I showed her the photos Karen had taken, the manipulated emails, the documented proof of her mother's betrayal. I explained how David wasn't the understanding friend he pretended to be, but an opportunistic social climber who saw her as a stepping stone to wealth and status. Kate listened in stunned silence as 3 months of careful manipulation unraveled before her eyes. When I finished, she sat down heavily on a piece of driftwood, staring out at the lake. "My mother," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "My own mother did this to me, to us. I'm sorry, Kate. I know how much you wanted that relationship with her." Kate was quiet for a long time, processing everything I told her. When she finally spoke, her voice was shaky but determined. "Michael, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. Anything. Did you ever consider just letting it happen? Letting me make the mistake of believing their lies and walking away from our marriage?" I thought about her question seriously before answering. For about 10 seconds, yeah. I thought maybe it would be easier to just let you go rather than fight for us. But then I realized that if I did that, I'd be giving up on the best thing that ever happened to me without a real fight. Kate sat back down on the driftwood, staring out at the darkening water. I need time to process this, Michael. What my mother did. It's going to take me a while to understand how someone who's supposed to love me could be so manipulative. I know, I said, sitting beside her. Take all the time you need. But I don't want to lose us while I'm figuring this out, she said, finally looking at me. Can you be patient with me while I work through this? I took her hand gently. We'll get through this together, Kate, however long it takes. As we drove back to Columbus Sunday afternoon, Kate was mostly quiet, lost in thought about everything I'd revealed. But as we crossed the Ohio state line, she surprised me. Michael, she said, I know I said I need time to process this, but there's one thing I'm sure about. We can't let them think they won. What if we don't confront them directly, but instead expose their scheme to my father and everyone else who needs to know the truth? I looked at her with a mixture of surprise and admiration. That's pretty strategic thinking. My mother taught me to play chess, Kate said with a bitter smile. She just never expected me to use those skills against her. By the time we reached Worthington, we'd outlined a plan that would turn Victoria and David's conspiracy against them. It would require patience, careful timing, and a bit of theatrical deception. But if it worked, it would not only save our marriage but also protect Kate's relationship with her father, who had no idea what his wife had been doing behind his back. But before I could plan our counterattack, I needed to understand exactly who we were dealing with. Sunday morning, I overslept. The lack of sleep over the past few days was finally catching up with me. After brewing my coffee, I started my laptop and plugged in my external drive to download all of David Coleman's emails from his archived folders. I also decided not to wait for Karen to contact me, but to call her at a decent hour using the cell phone number she'd given me. I needed to know what had happened Saturday night after I'd left Manhattan. With a cup of coffee and a toasted bagel, I started reading through David's correspondence. What I discovered made me realize that David Coleman was an even bigger piece of garbage than I'd initially thought. Victoria Harrison wasn't the only married woman he was entertaining, and one email in his outbox answered a lot of my questions. It was addressed to someone named Dennis. Dennis, it's time to return the favor. For the past 4 months, I've been entertaining an old high society matron. This woman is so blue-blooded she won't even acknowledge anyone beneath her station. Hence her willingness to overlook my situation, given my pedigree. What she doesn't know is that my father disowned me 5 years ago. You're probably wondering why I'm even bothering with some old broad. 2 reasons. Her daughter's a knockout, but this old lady is certifiable. She's trying to ruin her daughter's marriage to some working class nobody so her daughter and I can get married. And then this old bat and I can see each other without anyone suspecting a thing. Can you believe that? You can't make this stuff up. The email continued. Did I mention I work for her husband? And he's a clueless fool? The old woman is encouraging her daughter to leave her husband, and I'm supposed to be waiting to pick up the pieces. I can guarantee a very long engagement. The daughter will probably be beautiful but too conservative for my taste, and you know I'm not the marrying kind. At some point, this old broad will probably want to talk to my father. That's not going to happen, and that's where you come in. I'm sending you a cell phone. Keep it charged. When I call, answer it and pretend you're my father. I'll ask her to speak with you. Don't overplay it. Just pick up the phone. Remember, I'm counting on you like you counted on me last year. Don't screw it up. Sorry to be so cloak and dagger, but I don't want to take any chances until I have a decent payday. Did I mention this old broad is worth millions? Reading that email, I almost felt sorry for Victoria for about half a second. Then I realized I was dealing with a snake's nest, and this was totally beyond anything I'd imagined. I was hoping Karen's experience would help me figure out the next step. While waiting for Karen to call back, I connected to my work server and spent several hours monitoring David's computer activity. I watched and recorded everything he did online, including his banking access. By 2 p.m., I had his user ID and password for the bank's internal systems. I couldn't take the suspense anymore and called Karen on her cell phone. "Hi, Michael. I've been waiting for your call. Sorry to bother you on a Sunday. Please apologize to your husband and kids. But I need to know what you saw last night after I left. You'll be happy to know that your wife showed up in a cab just after 10 o'clock. She got out and walked toward the door. David walked beside her and seemed to be trying to persuade her to let him come upstairs. She shook her head. He tried to kiss her, but she turned away, and he only managed to kiss her cheek before she walked through the door. The doorman must have gotten instructions, because he didn't let David follow her inside. He turned away, but not before cursing at the doorman. By then the cab had left. David must have already paid the driver. Rather presumptuous of him. He must not get turned down very often. So Kate didn't. Nothing happened? In other words, your wife didn't succumb to his charms. She got home at a decent time, and nothing inappropriate happened, unless you count the fact that she went on a date with another man. I was relieved that Kate hadn't been unfaithful, but I was still angry that our marriage was falling apart. Remember what you told me last night, Karen continued. She was set up by her mother. That doesn't excuse all of her behavior, but it does explain why she's acting this way. Okay, I agree. But Karen, there's something you need to hear. It sounds like David Coleman is involved with Kate's mother, and Victoria Harrison is destroying my marriage to keep Coleman around. No kidding? That's incredibly cold. I've been in this business for years, and it never ceases to shock me how evil people can be. How did you find out about this? If I tell you, do we have some sort of client detective privilege? No, Michael. If I get subpoenaed, I have to testify. So if you're doing something illegal, you need to decide if it's worth sharing. I thought about it and decided what the hell, and told Karen how I'd hacked into their email accounts. She, like many people in the past decade, was stunned by how easily their security had been compromised. I also told her that I had David's user ID and password to access personal accounts and wire transfers at the bank. You can actually access this guy's computer and read his passwords? Hell, later this week you're gonna have to teach me how to defend myself against people like you. In the meantime, I need to get back to my family. We're watching The Wizard of Oz, and the kids are giving me the, "When are you gonna stop talking on the phone" look. Sorry, Karen. Call me tomorrow when you've figured out Coleman's background, and I'll tell you the rest. With that, we hung up, and I continued digging through David Coleman and Victoria's email correspondence. By Sunday evening, when Kate returned from her parents' house, I had tons of information but no clear idea how to use it effectively. Unfortunately, all my clothes and personal belongings were still in the guest bedroom. Kate came rushing into the kitchen where I was sitting with a glass of wine. "Michael, where are your clothes?" I ignored her question. "How was your date last night?" An expression appeared on Kate's face that I hadn't seen before. Guilt, horror, deception all rolled into one. "What are you talking about? I didn't go on a date." Kate said it with such conviction that I might have believed her if I hadn't seen her getting into that cab with my own eyes. What do you call going to a play with an unrelated member of the opposite sex? Maybe you should look it up in the dictionary. There was that look again. Were you following me? Not that it matters, but I went into the city yesterday. I was planning to try to convince you and your mother that I should take you to the play instead. I pulled up to their building just in time to see you getting into a cab with some guy. Who was it? Okay, I lied to her, but it sounded plausible, and I didn't want Kate to discover what I was really up to and what I really knew. Michael, my mom got sick at the last minute, and one of my parents' friends was kind enough to escort me. Nothing happened. I played dumb. And who is this kind friend? Does he have a name? David Coleman. He works for my father. I decided it was time to get her thinking. Kate, your parents are trying to divide us. Think about it. I'll bet you $1,000 that your mother made a miraculous recovery on Sunday. This illness was completely staged. How did David Coleman get free at the last minute? It's time for you to wake up and realize that our marriage is almost over. Kate jerked back as if she'd been slapped. I didn't want this to escalate into a screaming match, so I took the opportunity to leave the kitchen and head for the guest room. It was a restless night and I didn't get much sleep. I ended up getting up early and was at the office before 7 a.m. At 8 a.m., my cell phone buzzed with a text message. Checking my phone, I saw that Kate had sent just 2 words, Jennifer Martinez. I guess Kate had already talked to her mother, and Victoria was filling her head with renewed suspicions about my past relationship with my coworker. My marriage was rapidly circling the drain. Late Monday night, Karen called me at work. Are you somewhere private where we can talk? I closed my office door. Yes, I'm in my office. What's up? First, tell me again about David Coleman's position at the bank. I figured she already had the basic information, so I focused on what I'd learned from his computer access. As far as I can tell from his emails and access authorizations, he's a wealth management advisor at Ohio Independent Bank. He mostly handles trust accounts and investment portfolios for high-net-worth clients. Yesterday, I watched him process emails from 3 different clients, 2 of whom requested funds transfers between various accounts. David created wire transfer instructions that were supposed to execute as soon as the bank opened this morning. I'll be able to confirm this later today when I get home to my computer. I don't want to use my work computer for that kind of surveillance. Did any of those transfers go to foreign banks? One was to an account in France, some wealthy kid studying in Paris, and his father was sending money for tuition and living expenses. Karen seemed to think for a few seconds, and there was silence on the line. Then she began to recount what she'd managed to discover. I spent the morning gathering information on our friend. First of all, this guy had serious problems in college. I haven't been able to figure out all the details yet, but it was bad enough that his family practically disowned him. He moved to New York to escape whatever happened out west. Karen continued, then I talked to a friend in the NYPD. Turns out that last year, a college buddy of Coleman's named Dennis Riley had stayed with him for a long weekend. This Riley character picked up a young woman at a bar and brought her back to Coleman's apartment. The woman had too much to drink and asked Riley to call her a cab. Riley refused and took advantage of the situation. When Riley passed out, the woman managed to leave the apartment and went straight to the local precinct to file a report. The police investigated, but Riley claimed it was consensual. Coleman supported Riley's version of events. Coleman even signed a statement claiming that the woman had come on to him after Riley went to sleep, and that's why she was so angry. With 2 men against 1 woman, the DA refused to press charges against Riley. The cops wanted to pursue the case, but the DA said it would be difficult to prove. So this predator gets away with it because Coleman provided false testimony. About right, I said, picking up David's email to Dennis and reading the first sentence to Karen. Karen paused for a second before replying. Looks like Riley owes Coleman a huge debt of gratitude for lying for him. How do you feel about doing some serious damage to those 2? One who commits crimes against women and one who lies to help criminals escape justice. No doubt about it. What's on your mind? Last night you told me how you managed to access Coleman's computer. How skilled are you? I mean, do you think you can open foreign accounts using his identity? Given his position at the bank, do you think you can manipulate his clients' funds? I have the technical computer knowledge, but no experience in opening accounts. And how illegal are you proposing to make this? I don't want to be involved in actually stealing funds. If we do it right, no one will lose money. I think we can wrap this guy up tight, but it's something we need to discuss in person. Can you meet tomorrow night? I'd like to bring a friend with me. Karen, I have to ask, why are you doing this without any monetary gain? I agreed to pay you a few thousand just to watch Kate on Saturday night and dig up dirt on David Coleman. Now all of a sudden we're talking about opening accounts, transferring money. and complex financial crimes. What's in it for you? Because I can't afford to pay you much more, and I certainly can't afford to get caught or go to jail. Karen's voice became very quiet and personal. This is personal, Michael. Someone took advantage of me when I was young and vulnerable. I was too embarrassed when I realized what had happened to call the police or seek help immediately. When my roommate returned from her trip home that weekend, she found me in distress and convinced me to go to the hospital and file a police report. Unfortunately, by the time I sought help, there was little evidence to support my case. I filed a complaint anyway, but it was difficult to prove, and nothing came of it. Her voice strengthened with resolve. So to answer your question, I'm doing this for that girl who was victimized by Dennis Riley. She deserves to know that not every predator gets away with it. And David Coleman is going down for helping a criminal escape justice. They're both despicable. Karen's voice had changed as she told her story. Obviously, it still caused her pain. I'd only known Karen for a few days, having spent less than 3 hours with her on Saturday night and on phone calls. But I already knew I would help her bring these criminals to justice. As my grandmother used to say, sometimes putting yourself on the line, even if you're bending the law, is the right thing to do. Before we hung up, Karen told me to send her everything I'd discovered about Coleman's computer access, bank accounts, loans, mortgages, investment portfolios, everything. I told her she'd have it all that night. We arranged a time and place to meet on Tuesday night. I made an excuse to Kate that I was working late, but it didn't matter since we were barely speaking and sleeping in separate bedrooms anyway. Tuesday night, I met Karen at a quiet pub in downtown Columbus. As promised, she had a friend with her. Karen introduced him only as Hank. If I had to guess, Hank was a former employee of one of the alphabet soup agencies, most likely CIA from Langley. After I explained that I now had complete access to David Coleman's computer and his personal and professional banking systems, Hank and Karen outlined their plan. First, Hank said, we purchase an airline ticket to Dubai for Coleman using his credit card. Second, we open an account in Dubai under Coleman's name. I'll give you the instructions. Dubai is one of the most accommodating havens for illicit funds since the Swiss got into trouble with the U.S. Treasury. Third, we arrange for wire transfers of several $1 million to accounts in Dubai, to be sent early in the morning. I interrupted Hank and turned to Karen. Wait, I said no stealing. Hank answered for Karen. We will ensure that none of the funds actually leave the country. You will make one very minor error in the wire transfer instructions. That mistake will delay the transfer, and it will look like Coleman tried to steal but screwed up technically. I thought for a moment, then decided, okay, so what's next? According to what you found, Coleman has a line of credit on his house with over $100,000 unused. He also has another $60,000 in a brokerage account. Both of those accounts are going to be compromised to wire transfers to an account in Dubai, but these will go through without error. Do you have a problem with that? Not if it's his money going overseas. Good. If he's being drained financially on this side of the Atlantic, it'll prevent him from getting decent legal representation, which will go a long way toward helping us nail his rapist buddy Dennis Riley. Karen took the opportunity to add the final step. And here's the culminating move. You send a letter from David to Dennis. Here, read this. Karen handed me a draft of the proposed letter. Dennis, forget the rich old broad. I've got bigger fish to fry. By tomorrow, I'll be wealthy enough to last a long time, at least until I find another old woman with more money than brains. That means leaving the country, but there's nothing here worth sticking around for. I stared at the letter, realizing the full scope of what we were planning. This wasn't just about exposing David Coleman's scheme with Victoria. This was about bringing down a network of criminals who had escaped justice for too long. When do we do this? I asked. Thursday morning, Hank replied. That gives us tomorrow to finalize everything. Are you ready for this? I thought about Kate, about our marriage, about the young woman Dennis Riley had assaulted, and about the justice that had been denied. I'm ready, I said. Thursday morning arrived with the weight of inevitability. I woke up early in our bedroom, Kate still sleeping beside me. Despite our reconciliation, my mind was racing through the technical details of what we were about to execute. The plan Hank and Karen had outlined was intricate, and there would be no room for error. The full letter that Karen had shown me the night before was even more damning than the excerpt I'd initially read. Dennis, forget the rich old broad. I've got bigger fish to fry. By tomorrow I'll be wealthy enough to last a long time, at least until I find another old woman with more money than brains. That means leaving the country, but there's nothing here worth sticking around for. In a way, I have you to blame or thank, depending on how things work out. I got a call today from some investigator asking questions about your adventure last year. You should have learned your lesson at Ohio State like I did. Get approval before you do anything stupid, because next time I won't be around to lie for you. I'll contact you and let you know where I land. I'm sure the feds will be monitoring this email after tomorrow, so don't bother responding. I'll delete this account before I leave the country. The letter was perfect. It would implicate Dennis Riley in his previous assault while making it appear that David Coleman was abandoning both Victoria and his criminal friend to flee with stolen money. By 9 a.m., I was at my desk, remotely accessing David's computer systems. The Dubai account was already established, thanks to Hank's connections. I initiated the wire transfers from David's personal accounts, his credit line and brokerage account. These transactions went through smoothly, draining over $160,000 of his personal wealth to the overseas account. Then came the more complex part, setting up the attempted theft of client funds. I accessed 3 major trust accounts that David managed, initiating wire transfers totaling several $1,000,000. But as planned, I introduced a subtle error in the routing codes that would cause the transactions to fail and trigger automatic fraud alerts. The beauty of the plan was that the failed theft attempt would look like David had gotten greedy and made a mistake under pressure, while the successful personal transfers would suggest he was fleeing the country with whatever money he could grab quickly. At 10:30 a.m., I sent the incriminating email from David's account to Dennis Riley. By 11 a.m., I had purchased an airline ticket to Dubai using David's credit card, scheduled for that afternoon. The trap was set. Within 2 hours, the bank's fraud detection systems had flagged the suspicious wire transfer attempts. By early afternoon, David Coleman was in custody, facing charges of attempted embezzlement, wire fraud, and conspiracy. The authorities found the email to Dennis Riley during their investigation of David's computer, and by evening, Dennis was also under arrest as investigators reopened the assault case from the previous year. But the most satisfying part came when Victoria Harrison discovered that her sophisticated lover was actually a criminal who had been using her to get access to her husband's bank and potentially her daughter's inheritance. I spent Thursday evening monitoring news reports and police activity online. Everything was proceeding exactly as planned. David and Dennis were both in custody, their scheme unraveling rapidly as investigators dug deeper into their backgrounds. Friday morning, I received a call that would change everything. "Michael, this is Robert Harrison. I need to see you immediately. Can you come to my office this afternoon?" Kate's father sounded grim but not hostile. I agreed to meet him at 3 p.m. When I arrived at the imposing headquarters of Ohio Independent Bank, Robert's assistant escorted me directly to his corner office. Robert, he'd always insisted I call him Mr. Harrison, despite 3 years of marriage to his daughter, looked older than I remembered. The events of the past few days had clearly taken their toll. "Michael," he began, pouring coffee for both of us, "I have some things to show you. Some of them will hurt Kate if I give them to her directly. Some might hurt me personally. I don't know you well enough to predict your reaction, but I'm certain you don't want your wife to get hurt. So I'm giving these materials to you to handle as you see fit." He handed me a thick folder. I hired a private investigator to find out why my daughter's marriage had started deteriorating recently. I have no idea how he obtained these materials, but I hope you'll be as shocked by their contents as I was. I opened the folder, already knowing what I'd find evidence of Victoria's affair with David Coleman and their conspiracy to break up my marriage to Kate. Robert had apparently conducted his own investigation parallel to mine, though he'd done it through legitimate channels. The evidence was damning. Hotel receipts, email printouts, photographs of Victoria and David together. But what struck me most was the look of genuine pain and confusion on Robert's face. "Mr. Harrison," I said carefully, "I appreciate you sharing this with me instead of confronting Kate directly. That shows real consideration for her feelings." "Please," he said with a tired smile, "call me Robert, and actually my friends call me Bob. I think we're past the formal stage of our relationship, don't you?" I was taken aback by this sudden warmth, but I pressed on. "Bob, there are some things I need to tell you as well. Things that might help you understand the full scope of what's been happening." Over the next hour, I told Bob everything about the mysterious note, my investigation into David and Victoria's scheme, even my involvement with Karen and the elaborate trap that had brought David down. I was careful to frame my actions as defensive rather than vindictive, emphasizing my desire to protect Kate from being manipulated. Bob listened intently, occasionally asking clarifying questions. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and stared out the window at downtown Columbus for a long moment. "You know what's funny?" he said finally. "I turned 65 this year, and I'm just now discovering that my entire adult life has been built on lies." "What do you mean?" Bob picked up a photograph from his desk, a family portrait from Kate's college graduation. "Victoria always told me she gave up her career dreams for our family, that she was too young when we married and had Kate, and that I pressured her into abandoning her professional aspirations. She put a guilt trip on me that lasted for decades." His voice became bitter. "What a load of garbage. The only career Victoria ever dreamed of was finding someone wealthy enough to support her lifestyle. For years, I listened to her complain about her lost potential as a professional tennis player. You actually have to be good at tennis to make money at it, and Victoria, after 45 years of lessons, still can't hit a decent backhand." Bob stood up and began pacing behind his desk. "My entire adult life, I've spent 90% of my time working at this bank, doing everything possible to make it the most successful regional institution in Ohio. That's how I was raised. My generation believed that providing financial security was how a man showed love for his family. We were different from your generation, Michael. We weren't best friends with our wives. When we had free time, we went to the golf course to make business connections. I spent more time with my regular foursome than I did with my wife or daughter. And you know what? Victoria wanted it that way. She showed no interest when I suggested she take up golf. She talked me out of it when I proposed we learn tennis together. She claimed it would interfere with her improvement, but the truth is she was already planning her affair with her tennis instructor." Bob's candor shocked me. "I'm sorry I brought this painful information to your attention, Bob." "No, Michael. I'm grateful you shared it with me. It's one thing to overlook a discreet affair. It's another level entirely to be so calculating that you're willing to sacrifice your daughter's happiness to keep your lover around. And with one of my own employees, no less. Every day that little snake walked past me in these hallways, knowing he was sleeping with my wife while plotting to steal my daughter." Bob's anger was building, but it was controlled, methodical. "Well, David Coleman won't be entertaining my wife for quite a while, since he was arrested yesterday morning for embezzling from our clients and providing false statements in a criminal case. If everything the police told me this morning is accurate, David will be gone for several years." "And Victoria?" I asked. "Unfortunately, Victoria has her own trust fund worth several $1,000,000, which actually works in my favor during divorce proceedings. She can support herself at some spa or country club, crying crocodile tears until some other opportunist picks her up. I'll be easily replaced in her life." Bob's expression hardened. "She will lose considerable social status, though. The other wives in our circle will shun her once they learn what she's done. They'll be protecting their own territory. There's a dog-eat-dog world among that crowd." She'll also lose her relationship with Kate, but judging from what I've read here, he gestured to the evidence folder, she probably won't care much about that. What about Kate? I asked. I wonder if it's too late to start a real relationship with my daughter. Bob looked directly at me. I love Kate. I really do. But I let her mother control their relationship for too long. That's another thing I owe Victoria for. Somehow, I have to find a way to make Victoria pay for all the pain she's caused. Maybe not immediately, but eventually. Bob's tone became more hopeful. In the meantime, Michael, I want to ask for your help. You say you love Kate. Despite everything that's happened, do you think you can repair your marriage? I hope so, Bob. Logically, I know that what happened isn't Kate's fault. She was manipulated by someone she trusted. It helps that she didn't actually become involved with David, at least not romantically. But emotionally, that's the hardest part. I'm not like you just showed me proof of your wife's infidelity and betrayal, and you didn't shed a tear. You got a little angry, but you kept your cool. When Kate walked out that second weekend, I cried for the first time in my adult life. I don't know how you do it. Bob looked at me seriously and made a decision. Because I started locking my emotions away over 40 years ago. Let me tell you a story that very few people have heard. Bob settled back into his chair. When I was fresh out of college, I enrolled in Navy flight school. It was incredibly demanding, but I passed officer candidate school. I was so proud the day I received my commission in front of my parents. I was going through flight training when my life became a nightmare. I made a critical error and crashed during a training exercise. His voice became quieter. I was the sole survivor. My flight instructor died in that crash, along with another student pilot. The investigation concluded that I had followed protocol correctly, but I knew the truth. I had made a split-second decision that cost 2 men their lives. The Navy cleared me of wrongdoing, but I couldn't live with myself. I resigned my commission and came home to Ohio. I was so depressed I could barely function. One night, sitting in my childhood bedroom, I made the same decision you almost made in high school. I decided to end it all. I was stunned. This successful, composed businessman had once been as broken as I'd been that night after discovering Ashley's betrayal. What stopped you? My father. He knocked on my bedroom door and asked if we could talk. I don't remember everything he said, but the essence was this: son, you can spend the rest of your life carrying this guilt, or you can use it to become someone who honors the memory of those men by living a life worthy of their sacrifice. Bob's eyes were bright with unshed tears, the first emotion I'd seen him display. So I locked away the pain, threw myself into business school, and built a life focused on achievement and responsibility rather than feeling. It served me well professionally, but it cost me relationships with the people I loved most. I don't want you to make the same mistake, Michael. Yes, your marriage has been damaged by outside forces, but it's not broken beyond repair. Don't let this experience turn you into an emotional robot like me. Fight for Kate, but fight with your heart open, not closed. Bob stood up and extended his hand. Now, let's figure out how to fix this mess and give my daughter the family she deserves. I left Bob's office with a new understanding of both my father-in-law and my own emotional journey. That evening, I drove home to find Kate's car in the driveway. She was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at a cup of cold tea. Kate, I said softly, sitting down across from her. She looked up, and I could see she'd been crying. Michael, I know about David Coleman. I know about my mother. I know about everything. How? My father called me into his office this afternoon, right after you left. He told me everything about the affair, about the scheme to break up our marriage, about David's arrest. He showed me evidence that my mother had been manipulating me for months. Kate's voice broke. My own mother, Michael. She was willing to destroy my marriage just to keep her boy toy around. How could I have been so blind? I reached across the table and took her hands. You weren't blind, Kate. You were desperate for a relationship with your mother. She exploited that need, and that's not your fault. But I doubted you. I believed her lies about you and Jennifer. I let her convince me that you were holding me back instead of supporting my dreams. Kate, we both made mistakes. I should have trusted you enough to share my suspicions earlier instead of conducting a secret investigation. We should have been fighting this together from the beginning. Kate squeezed my hands. Can we fix this, Michael? Can we get back what we had before all this started? I think we can build something even stronger, I said. But it's going to require complete honesty going forward. No more secrets. No more letting outside influences drive wedges between us. Kate stood up and moved around the table to sit beside me. I love you, Michael. I never stopped loving you, even when I was confused and angry. I just lost sight of what really mattered. That night, for the first time in months, Kate and I slept in our own bed together. We didn't make love. We weren't ready for that level of intimacy yet, but we held each other and talked until dawn about rebuilding our marriage and our future. The legal proceedings against David Coleman and Dennis Riley unfolded over the following months. David was convicted of embezzlement and conspiracy charges, receiving a 4-year federal prison sentence. More importantly, Dennis Riley was finally charged with assault in connection with the previous year's incident. With David unavailable to provide false testimony and new evidence suggesting their previous statements had been fabricated, Dennis was convicted and sentenced to 10 years. Karen called me when the verdicts were announced. Justice finally served, she said with satisfaction. That young woman can know that her attacker didn't get away with it after all. Bob followed through on his plans to divorce Victoria. The proceedings were swift and decisive, with evidence of her affair and conspiracy to interfere with Kate's marriage. Victoria received no alimony and had to settle for her trust fund inheritance. Bob retained most of his assets and was able to continue his comfortable retirement when he stepped down from the bank at 63. Victoria's fall from Columbus high society was spectacular and complete. When news of her manipulation of Kate's marriage became known among their social circle, she became a pariah. Everyone had known she could be cruel and calculating, but they hadn't realized how low she would sink to get what she wanted. Victoria initially fled to Palm Beach, but her reputation followed her. She was denied membership in the exclusive tennis clubs and couldn't make a single genuine friend during her 9 months in Florida. Next, she tried Palm Springs, thinking a few thousand miles might erase the bad odor of her reputation. While her millions bought her access to some social circles, she couldn't compete with the younger wives for male attention. Like many women struggling with aging and low self-esteem, Victoria made some poor choices regarding cosmetic procedures. The results were not flattering. I only learned about her changed appearance because 2 years later, Victoria showed up on our doorstep. When I opened the front door, it took me several moments to recognize the person standing behind the screen door. I didn't bother opening the door. I just spoke through the screen. Victoria, what are you doing here? The unfriendliness in my voice couldn't have been more obvious. I want to see my daughter and grandchildren. Victoria, you're not welcome here. No one in this house wants to see you or even acknowledge your existence. Now, please leave. It took every ounce of self-control not to shout at her. You have no right to keep me from seeing Kate and the children. Victoria, you don't understand. I'm not preventing them from seeing you. Kate doesn't want to see you, and she'll do everything in her power to protect our children from your toxic influence. I started to close the door, but paused for a moment. My God, what did you do to your face? The comment just slipped out, and Victoria was so stunned by my bluntness that I was able to close the door before she could respond. She didn't give up easily. The next Monday, figuring I'd be at work, Victoria called the house. Kate later told me their conversation was brief and direct. Kate confirmed that Victoria was persona non grata in our home and around our children. Victoria tried to bribe Kate, offering $10,000 for each of the first 10 visits to our children's college funds. Kate refused the offer outright. When Victoria showed up at our children's daycare center, we obtained a restraining order. She tried calling Bob, pleading that 30 years of marriage should count for something. Bob laughed and hung up. The last we heard, Victoria was back in Palm Springs, involved with some much younger man who had been steadily draining her bank accounts. Sometimes bad things happen to bad people. Victoria's downfall reminded me of my final action against David Coleman. Using an assumed name, I sent him a letter in prison. It was short, only 8 sentences. "He's innocent," your lawyer said, but the jury thought otherwise. "For the crime that sent you to rock bottom, there are forces that ensure justice." "I'm innocent," you said again, but karma and justice went hand in hand. Now you realize that you just messed with the wrong person. As for Kate and me, we spent the following months carefully rebuilding our marriage. It wasn't easy. Trust, once broken, takes time to fully restore. But we were both committed to creating something stronger than what we'd had before. Bob became a regular presence in our lives, making up for the years he'd let Victoria control his relationship with Kate. Like me when I first met Kate, he was pleasantly surprised to discover what a wonderful, selfless person his daughter had become despite her mother's influence. Having Bob involved in our lives helped Kate recover from her mother's betrayal. We spent those months putting the pieces of our marriage back together, made easier by the fact that Kate had never actually cheated or lost her moral compass. The evening at the theater with David had been entirely innocent. She'd simply been set up by people she trusted. We ended up taking that delayed trip to Put-in-Bay, and later, Bob treated us to a week-long vacation on Cat Island in the Bahamas. Kate stayed an additional 4 days after I returned to work, spending private time with her father and beginning to heal their relationship. My cloud computing project was completed on time and under budget, earning me the promotion to IT director along with a substantial bonus and salary increase. The professional success felt good, but it was nothing compared to the satisfaction of saving my marriage and starting a real family. Speaking of family additions, Kate had to be convinced that she could still wear a bikini on our island vacation despite her changing figure. Robert Michael Thompson Bobby, named after his grandfather Robert, and his father, was born just over a year after we fully reconciled and began putting the pieces back together. Margaret Catherine Thompson Maggie, named after my grandmother Margaret and her mother Catherine, was born 2 years after Bobby. Bob retired when he turned 63 and devoted himself to spoiling his grandchildren. He even bought a small apartment near our house in Worthington that he uses as a second home. Years later, I'm grateful for the people who helped us through that crisis. Karen's relentless pursuit of justice, Hank's expertise, Bob's wisdom, and most importantly, Kate's ability to see through her mother's lies when it mattered most. I learned that real love means fighting for each other when the world tries to tear you apart. Kate and I didn't just survive Victoria's betrayal. We came out stronger, more honest, and unbreakable. Sometimes the wrong man turns out to be exactly the right person to fight for what matters most. And sometimes, when everything seems lost, the people who love you will help you find your way back home. The war for our marriage was over. We had won. Thank you for your viewing. See you next time. If you enjoyed this, subscribe to JK Tells a Story for more tales.